Bahaj, and tonight I'll be serving as your host slash moderator. I would like to welcome Mrs. Quincy Gums Marie, Ms. Deanne Kentish Rogers, and Dr. Ellis Lorenzo Webster to tonight's show. Good night, everyone. Dr. Webster, as usual, we will have you open with a word of prayer.
Good night and thank you. Welcome all. Let's bow our heads, close our eyes. Father in heaven, want to thank you for this day, for uh, helping us to see another one, and for blessing us, blessing the people of Anguilla, in Anguilla and outside. We ask that as this show continues, that you continue to give us the words to speak, open our hearts and minds, and help us to have an understanding of the issues as they pertain to Anguilla and its current state in the world. Thank you again, and be with those who listen and watch. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. All right. Dr. Webster, tonight we will open with you. We are again on the economy and looking at Anguilla's financial position, fiscal position, as we navigate these uncertain economic times with what we see happening in the Middle East and with that disturbance with the United States. Dr. Webster, I know, I believe it was last week, you would have written to the Premier and Minister of Finance requesting update on Anguilla's fiscal position. Have you received any answers to any of the questions that you would have submitted to her?
Good evening again, and thank you. Thank you for this opportunity. Certainly, we know that we're in a tenuous position in the world right now with the geopolitical events. And certainly, it is necessary to have resilience as a small developing state. Even as an overseas territory of the United Kingdom, we still need to ensure that we can withstand the crises, the shocks, whether internal and external, because we do know that elections have consequences, and certainly the state that we left Anguilla in February of 2025, we left reserves of almost $300 million. We were in a good place. Lots of capital projects and government funded were ongoing. People were working. People were fixing up their home, new homes. Had that confidence. The investors had confidence that the economy was going in the right direction. We know from the airport master plan that building the terminal building and then expanding the runway, very important to Anguilla's success. And so I wrote on the 31st of March to the Honorable Premier asking essentially for the state of the country, something that we did within the first couple months of us coming into government in 2020. We had a full-scale state of the nation in terms of the finances, the debt, and each department was able to lay out where they stood, and we knew where we wanted to go, and certainly tough decisions had to be made based on the circumstances we were in. At this point, I received an email response from the Premier stating that she would respond to the 8 points that I raised and the queries, but so far nothing further than that. I'm a little bit concerned, and we all should be, that the government has put out their plan for relief, which comes up to about $10 million over the next 3 months. and that they would be given relief to the people, including the removal of freight and insurance from the calculation of customs duties, removing the duties from fuel, and also uh, capping the fuel surcharge at 42 cents for domestic residencies and businesses, knowing that Anglec has raised the fuel surcharge to 82 to 88 cents. And also the government will be taking the hit on the for businesses, accommodation, villas, hotels, capping them at 65 cents and paying the difference. Significant uh, pushback from the administration during the House meeting on Tuesday when we raised the issue that there could be more done and more is expected to be done because we were in a position where we could do better. If you compare 10 million EC dollars over the next 3 months in relief to the people of Anguilla versus spending about $16 million EC for a building in London that serves no specific purpose at this given point in time. I think that comparison did rankle the premier and the other members because I think when you understand that you can do better, you should do better. And so I am waiting to respond so that we know what the state of finance is in Anguilla and what has been committed to by the current administration. And those were some of the questions that I asked. And so I thank you for the question and hope that I get, and the people of Anguilla, it's not just for me, it's for the people of Anguilla to have an idea of where we are right now, what type of reserves we have, what commitments have been made, so that we know whether we can weather this storm. This storm is not going to finish soon because no matter how many chances at ceasefire that are presented, when the cost of fuel has gone up and shipping is being blocked in the Straits of Hormuz, that continues to cause the fuel to go up, 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 and up. And with that goes the cost of living because everything else is then, escalated based on that. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Dr. Webster. Do you do you find it a little bit strange that this administration has been withholding the country's fiscal position? I know during the APM's time in office, there were quarterly and sometimes quarterly updates on in terms of where the country is at, and we have not yet seen anything like that from this administration. Uh, does this reflect their unwillingness to be transparent, in your opinion?
Well, if I thought it was just being not being transparent, I don't know if I'd be as perturbed about that as to being concerned that they've eaten into, the financial position that they were left with. And that might be the concern that they don't want to let the people know where they are and what they've committed to and where we are now. Because we must know that history has a habit of repeating itself, and the AUF administration has always, when given a good wicket to play on, and they have ended up squandering what was left, 65 million back in 2009, and the 33 million in 2015, with nothing to show for those reserves being wiped out. I mean, they certainly have a bigger till to work with now. Um, they stopped the going ahead with the construction of the government administrative buildings, having public servants working in dilapidated and unacceptable conditions, and decided that that underspend should be ring fenced for a building in London. Uh, I have concerns about that. So certainly, we should be transparent. The government has to be transparent because they represent the people. But I am a little more concerned that there is more to it than just the lack of transparency. I think that they don't want the people to know where we are from where we were.
Lots to ponder and consider as it relates to that. I want to go over to Mrs. Quincy Gomes Marie. Good night.
Good night, and I'm so excited to be here. Part of my first APM Online. We have always been a progressive bunch, and we've always found a way to get into the homes and the hearts of the people with a message of progress. And I'm just really excited to add to what has been a very strong foundation thus far.
All right, thank you. I want to get into something that you've spoken about during your time in office and even on the campaign trail as it relates to the AI um, revenue. I know you spoke very heavily about a sovereign wealth fund. We've not seen any work being done on that in the last 13 plus months. Where do you think we would have been now, given um, the position that we find ourselves in globally? Where do you think Anguilla would have been had we established that a year ago?
Well, I don't think we can look at that in isolation. When I say that, I mean that GST and other measures would have also had to form part of that pie. There was a strong appetite to review the rates given the performance, but there was never an intention to completely do away with it and add a new tax as this administration have done. So they would have completely done away with the goods and services tax and then added a business tax on the businesses called the general sales tax. And and sorry, the goods and the goods tax, sorry. Um, and that has in turn increased the cost of doing business in Angola, which would result in the increase in the cost of living for the average person. For the people who went to a restaurant the day after GST was removed, and the people who went to the restaurant 2 months after, they would see that their bill increased by more than 13%. So one of the things that I noticed that some things increased by 16 and 17%, other things increased by 20%. And so we have not seen relief. What we have seen, though, is a gutting of government finances and an over-reliance on AI, which is something that is unstable because it does not have a proven track record of overproduction in the way it's producing for us. And so we have limited our ability to navigate tough times and do the ordinary work of nation building. And the need for that is not one that I have to go too far to find. In Armor, we needed about $100 million to kind of get back to where we were. Pounds, I should say. We got 60 million pounds because you remember that the school is still uncompleted. We had to go in our own pocket to complete the Blowing Point Ferry Terminal. So there was a lot of things that we needed to just get back to 2017 that we still are working on right now because the 60 million pounds that were added as the second coming of Christ was not enough. That should tell us that in our coffers, we need at least 100 million pounds set aside for development and response to catastrophic occurrences. That is the message. That is the thing that we should have come away from Irma with. So not just being overexcited that we got some money, but it should tell you that a storm that can last about 8 hours can cost you over $100 million, over 100 million pounds. And so realizing the consequence of that, we sought to ring fence finances exclusively for development. And then that meant now that we can work on, you want to take off your mic? Okay. We're in the same room this time, so we're not at home. And so we may have some Jimmy fixing here and there. But that would mean, though, that we wouldn't have been trying to stress our very tight budgets as a small island developing state into how do we develop, how do we operate. Our ordinary operating costs are already taking a lot from us. But if we had a development fund, we could have looked at development in in a manner that was progressive and sustainable so that we can say, okay, we can see the needs of today and we can also foresee the needs that we will have tomorrow. When I was coming down here, I landed in a pothole that nearly took me from the school, the Webster School in Easton, straight out by, I want to say,
By the stoplight.
maybe the
By
stoplight,
Mings.
by by Albert Lake. And it didn't take me, it dropped me off Tanglewood. That's that pothole took me. And it's given us a reality that our roads still would need to be redone soon. When I was down the Sandy Hill Road, they're doing that, they're completing that road that was started by the Angular Progressive Movement. They're on the path of completion, but they have to cut into the road. And that creates another issue. A couple days ago, I was driving and I was around a corner, and around the corner there, the guys from Waterworks fixing the road. So now we have a water issue, to replacing the roads that we
Yeah.
have. Any country would know who respects economics would know that development comes. You fix a new road, you're going to see homes going down that road. You fix a new road, you're going to see businesses going down that road. And when we look across the Caribbean, we have to appreciate that there was a time when Angola was head and shoulders in terms of development or infrastructure development um, over all of these Caribbean countries. But they had national development plans that they have been working to and using their finances, their windfall finances towards their development. And you go to these other Caribbean islands that you visited 20 years ago, and they are ahead of Angola in a lot of this development because we decided we did a road in 2002, somewhere around there, 2002, 2005. And that was it. We had nothing else to plan for. There was nothing else to do. And the development fund is really important because I said this, and it is the Angola Progressive Movement's campaign, that we are in competition for the minds and the bodies of our young people because they are looking at better and bigger everywhere they go. And when we look at what is happening and the lack of concerted efforts to find out the cost of developing our infrastructure in a resilient manner and in a modern manner. And we're just looking at the small things that we're doing here today. We're looking at, okay, we're going to not do the government administration building because we want to put money in something else. So we prefer to have people sitting in mold. I mean, these are things that your national development plan would have helped you to flesh out. Your national development fund as well, because you can have a plan, but you don't have a fund. And if ever there's a situation, there's a hiccup in the AI world, it doesn't mean that it has to, the bubble needs to pop indefinitely. But even if there's a hiccup, at least we would have our ordinary operating expenditure and we wouldn't be wondering what do we do to pay the people of Angola tomorrow. And then have our monies dedicated to, and not just infrastructural development, social development, climate change mitigation and management, renewable energy, all of the things that we want to do. That was important, but I want to touch back on something Dr. Webster was speaking on earlier, which is the response to what is happening globally. There's something that we need to appreciate that we cannot use ordinary measures to respond to extraordinary crises. And what we are seeing is a repackaging of some of APM's work that was really in what we can call ordinary times. It wasn't a war-induced matter. It was just the fact that people needed support and we had the means as a government to support them. So if you rehash those measures and try to apply it to wartime and global recessions, you're not going to get the impact you're looking for. But this administration that's in power at the moment, they have it easy actually, because what I would have done if I were them was to look at what we did during COVID, because COVID would give you an idea of who the vulnerable sectors of persons are. And if they looked at who we had to address, support, and give a hand up to, it's not the people they're catering to in this response, which means then that it is bound to fall short because the vulnerable has been eclipsed by the need to pretend that they're doing something. Now, here are the vulnerable sects that I'm just going to wrap up right now. Yeah, identified.
I want you to just unmute yourself and we're going to go that way, just so that we can hear you.
So here are the vulnerable sectors we identified. We had the boating industry. We had persons who would have needed financial assistance because they were in the hotel sector. We had families who are already previously on the welfare system, on the social development system. We had vulnerable businesses that we identified that relied heavily on tourism. And we also had persons who are aged and families with children over a certain age, under a certain age, sorry, because we would need to work out childcare and other things like that. This relief package does not touch on any of those things other than giving persons around $200 a month electricity credits and stopping it off in the hottest months of the year. I don't know any government in its right mind that would subsidize hotel electricity bills and simultaneously stop an unemployment committee from operating that was specifically geared towards managing unemployment in the hospitality industry and pension. So now you have the vulnerable that continues to exist in, on the far side of the moon. That's a language you're using these days. I've been following that. It's so beautiful. On the far side of the moon, and then the people who can help themselves through pricing are being supported. I wouldn't even mind if there was a position to say, okay, hotels that earn a certain amount are over a certain amount, under a certain amount would be addressed through this relief package. We know that hotels are big consumers. We could have even had a 6-month package for our local, our households and smaller businesses. But when you're trying to subsidize hotel energy costs, you cannot do it beyond 3 months. What's going to happen to the boat operators going to St. Martin daily? That's a public ferry. Why weren't they prioritized as opposed to hotels that are rated 5-star by Forbes? What is going to happen to the people who, if this gets really bad, because we're seeing the data globally, it doesn't matter if it's not happening here as yet, but we're seeing the data globally that the prices of airline tickets are increasing and the appetite to travel is decreasing. What is going to happen if the hotels start to lay off people earlier and they need some sort of unemployment? Why has that not been addressed? What sort of relief are we having when the relief that we're getting today is less than the relief we got in regular times under the Angular Progressive Movement?
Quincy, you raise a very good point, and I harken back to an interview that both you and Deanne had recently with Elkin to the point, and you mentioned during that interview that Anguilla's economic position is hinged on what you call the ego of the current Minister of Economics. And do you think then that his inability, is it then his inability um, to foresee some of the things that you're speaking about is why we're in the position that we're in, where we're seeing that there is less um, support being given to the most vulnerable? Is it that for that very same reason that the external pressures still provide support to the tourism industry, as opposed to our people, the people who vote, the people who are most affected and can be most affected? Do you think that is why we're where we are at?
I think it's a mixture of competence and understanding the country you're operating in. Because you can't tell me the person who was willing to die on the hill of cornflakes can't understand that people need support at home. I mean, it's just impossible to me. I can't make that connection. Every day, the price of cornflakes. And now you're deciding that the priority today is the price of fuel at a five-star hotel. How does one go from that to this? I think a lot of what we have seen in this relief is pressure from the opposition and opposing voices saying we need to see something, and lack of creativity and just exposure and knowledge to be able to say, well, here's what we can do for the people that we serve. This was just a matter of saying, shut up. What's the hullabaloo about? You got something. It's not enough. It's not nearly enough. And this was a cry of the people who are in power today. Everything the APM did in those last 5 years was not enough. It didn't go far enough. This was okay, but it wasn't good enough. So if you had the wherewithal then to say we could go further, and we didn't have the financial wherewithal to do so, and now you are in a position of power and you have the financial wherewithal to do so, and you're not doing enough, how are we not to consider that this is intentional? It is intentional. And again, I will say what I said back then, you can't expect puddles to operate like oceans. If you don't have the depth to do the work, it will show it will be manifested in the results of the things you do. And it just might be that if you don't have the competence, you don't have the depth, you don't have the understanding, it will result in packages like what we see now.
Good. Um, I think just listening to what you said in terms of it not being enough, listening to our colleague, the representative for Road North, in his presentation, he ended his presentation yesterday by saying, thank you for the pennies. We like pennies, we like coins, but at this point, we dissolve paper. So you've done a little bit, but you've not done enough. And Dr. Epps, I want to jump back over to you with a question about what was taken to the House yesterday. And just some clarification. We know that the duty on imported goods is now calculated as on FOB. So they've removed and FOB stands for free on board. So they've removed the duty calculations from insurance and freight. However, the question that I have is, will insurance and freight be calculated and computed when considering the customs service charge and on the goods tax?
Well, I assume that the goods tax will be just based on the just the cost of the goods. I mean, that's my assumption. There was nothing in there that said that. It just basically was saying that the customs duty. Now, we do know that customs duty is one thing. The goods taxes are 9% on top of from before, and that would have included the cost of the good, the freight, the insurance, the customs charge of 1%. And they said it was not compounding because that's what the previous GST was doing based on what they were saying. So I would assume since that has not been part of the bill, the act that is now passed, that it would be calculated based on all those things. I mean, I'm assuming that it shouldn't, but based on the bill itself, there's nothing that addressed that in the areas that I noticed in the clauses. I didn't see anything that addressed that issue. But that would be a good question for us to ask the administration.
It really is, because to remove it simply only on the duties and not on the goods and not on the custom service charge, it again may reflect some of that incompetence that Quincy spoke to, in terms of them not fully understanding and appreciating the way that these costs are calculated and the effect and impact that it can have on the final cost of goods.
Certainly.
So those are definitely things that we need to push them on a little bit more, because when you just remove it from the duties, if I'm not mistaken, prior to the implementation of GST, the duties were reduced to a flat rate or a lower rate to accommodate. Okay, had a few technical difficulties just now, but I think I'm back. And I was saying is that if it was not included in the legislation yesterday, you can find that very well soon enough, if the intent really is to give true relief through removing the freight and insurance from the cost of goods, so the duties, that they may have to find themselves back to the House of Assembly to address these matters. I'm not sure who's advising them. Not sure if they were advised, and if they have taken that advice. We know that they have a history of not taking the advice of the technocrats. And so we find ourselves here. Allow me to now go over to Miss Deanne Kentish Rogers. Good evening. So we're working it out. We love each other so much that we decided to be in the same space tonight.
Okay, good evening. Feedback. Good evening, everyone. I'm excited to be here, of course. It's been a couple of weeks or maybe a month since you've last seen myself on radio, and very interested in this topic because it's very topical. It's very unusual times, and our responses, both as a people and a government, does and continues to say a lot about our priorities right now.
Right. So Deanne, as former Minister of Social Development, and Quincy spoke to the most vulnerable amongst us, and you would have had direct responsibility for the departments and ministries that dealt with that. Looking at the relief package that the current administration has put out there, do you think it's enough? And do you think it will benefit those who need it most?
Well, as Quincy would have said, we are looking at unprecedented times. And I think one of the things that we need to reiterate to the public is that this war in Iran and the implications globally are not just that oil prices are going up today, but that they will remain up for the foreseeable future. All of the reports from the World Economic Forum to multiple economic platforms, Bloomberg, are all saying that the structural costs of oil will remain elevated for the next 4 to 5 years at least. And that doesn't even have anything to do with LNG and all of these other inputs that have a material impact on the cost of living and inflation. So when the cost of oil goes up, the cost of transportation goes up, the cost of importation goes up, and as an import dependent territory, we feel that on a very real basis. And the most vulnerable among us are the ones who have the least ability to adjust or be flexible in the face of these type of material shocks and crises. And so one of the things that has been a hallmark of the Angular Progressive Movement, we've always said that we want our society to be judged the way any great society is judged, and the way we take care of our very vulnerable, the old, and the very young. And part of that response really was about building government's capacity, fiscally, financially, to be able to step in and protect the vulnerable when crises happen or when we can foresee and predict that their standard of living will be materially impacted by a crisis. And so I find it very interesting that the response from the government is, as I call it, demure. It's a very demure response because when the APM was in office, even though, as Quincy said, we did not have the fiscal ability to respond, which is why part of the reason why GST was implemented, we did not have the fiscal wherewithal to respond and to protect the most vulnerable among us. Now that the government not only have tax revenues, but also have windfall revenues from .ai, that their response is so scaled back. And I think that especially for the most vulnerable, and I think that is a very interesting data point when you consider them, the fact that the current government, they laid out a plan of putting people first. That was their, what they call it, whistle? Their what they call it, a thing whistle?
Dog whistle.
Their dog whistle was putting people first. And so when a government is looking at what a response should be, our first priorities is always the most vulnerable. So when we were doing things like the electricity credits, and I want to note the credits because I've had individuals who would have been on public assistance for whom the electricity credits, especially for persons who are coming from lower socioeconomic backgrounds, from people who would have been, needing day to day to get that support or month to month to get that support. Those electricity credits, persons would have told me, would have lasted them for years. for years, not for days, not for 3 months. And so it, as a measure of comparison, when you can foresee a crisis that will actually have a direct impact on electricity, where you have our electricity company saying that they're increasing the fuel surcharge, that the quote unquote not giving a handout government is saying we're going to cap it and we're going to subsidize, but the value of that subsidy is severely reduced. So the impact on a household basis is not as extensive as what we would have had in ordinary times, according to Quincy, in ordinary times. So we are here in crisis times. We would have been having these measures done in ordinary times, and in crisis times, the response is to be more restrained. And so from that vulnerable perspective, that's one part. That's one part of the response that I find very interesting. But vulnerability is a very wide, it's a very wide term, catch-all. And I think it's worth repeating that vulnerability comes up in terms of disability. It comes up in terms of financial vulnerability, emotional youth. There's a wide net. And one of the things that the APM would have implemented would have been things like, I want to use the term in normal times, would have been removing the fees for persons who are caring for others, right? Knowing that it is a necessary expenditure, because for persons who have loved ones who are elderly, who cannot move around, who are immobile, or who have some form of disease, that it is necessary. And that can strike any family, whether you are well-to-do or whether you're not. And part of the responses of really caring for your people is seeing, well, in crisis time, when people look at the expenses that seem like wants, when needs are food, water, electricity, transportation. And I say transportation because in Anguilla, it's a necessity. There's also silence there. We don't have, this was something that the APM was looking at doing, regulating the care economy so that we could then step in to subsidize care. We don't have the ability, or we don't see any steps being taken by the current administration to assist persons in that regard. Now we're looking at just inflation on a whole. I mean, the inflation, I think one of the key things that I find very interesting is that a lot of the conversation is geared and targeted around electricity costs. Of course, we're talking about oil, but one of the things that I think would have been materially different had the APM got back into power is the fact that we were pursuing a holistic renewable energy plan. And while hindsight is often 2020, so somebody might ask, well, why would that have been important? There is such a thing as energy sovereignty. And when you are dependent on other territories for your energy, you become very vulnerable. So part of the APM plan was to protect our people from external crises of this very nature by insulating ourselves through energy sovereignty. So in a circumstance like that, I can see where the government's demure response may have actually helped, because you would not have had to subsidize the cost of electricity. And this goes back again, in my opinion, to the question of the government's priorities, because we've been looking at over the past year at what the government has been spending money on or what the government has earmarked as a priority. And none of those things are a priority to our people. None of them. So it begs the question, who are we, what is the development path that our government is on? Because we don't know. Uh, 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 I can't tell you what the government's priorities are. This is probably the first time that I've ever heard of a government getting into office and not having a state of the what you call it, the union. We're not a union. A state of the nation address. It's the first time. Yet very soon after the government would have gotten in power, our premier was on a panel, a ECCB panel, taking credit for the fiscal discipline that Angola was being praised for in the BVI, while being one of the foremost torchbearers of arguing against the APM's fiscal discipline plan. And I think it's times like this, and that's why I say hindsight is 2020, that creates that very stark contrast. And it's not just a woulda, shoulda, coulda. Oh, you guys just saying this because you're not in office. But it's a reality because many countries now are asking questions about their own energy sovereignty. The UK, as a result of this war, saw solar panel purchases going up by 50% when the Iran war started. And yet, the discourse that I saw online was about how do we punish, this is a discourse I saw on Facebook. Locally? How do we punish local persons locally for going and purchasing solar panels? Well, the reality is that how does a government who refuses to take the aggressive push to renewable energy when they know it has a material impact not only on businesses, the businesses' cost of doing business, but on our regular civilians, you don't make that push. But then there are people who are very strong supporters of you, whose remarks are targeted towards punishing locals who decide I cannot bear the cost of these increases for an extended period of time. That's a very, very curious state of affairs to me.
Quincy, I don't know if you want to jump in a little bit on this, and if not, I do want to switch a little bit. And you want, okay. So I want you to jump in, but I also want you to speak a little bit to over the past few weeks as we've had this show, what emerged as a priority area, what should be a priority area, is food security. And how does that tie into the conversation that we're having today? Deanne mentioned energy sovereignty. How do we prioritize, and where do our priorities lie as it relates to both energy sovereignty, food security, and some of the things that she would have mentioned?
Well, I always like to reemphasize that food security is not just the provision of food. It's not just to say we planted things. Food security is about giving farmers the necessary inputs to ensure that the food is accessible to those who have to consume it. So it recognizes that food is a right and that every person deserves an opportunity to access good food, healthy food, and do so in a sustainable manner. And that is why we had a wide approach and a comprehensive approach into how we approach food security. So it's not just being able to support farmers and fishers to produce, but also mining and managing the linkages around food security. So for example, working with the UK, all of the overseas territories, are we working with them to see if there is a crisis of getting food from our ordinary sources? What are the available linkages available that you can support us with? Working with the OECS, working with our regional counterparts through the OECS and CARICOM to say, okay, we have recognized that while we can't grow certain foods in Anguilla, and it isn't, and we don't produce certain foods in Anguilla, we can partner with Trinidad, we can partner with Bahamas, we can partner with Barbados, we can partner with Dominica, we can formalize some of the informal trades that we have going on, people doing the busking. And there's a lot that was done, but there's a lot that needs to happen. And if we look on the ground, if we hear the cry from just the farmers, the fact that they feel as though they are in competition with the governments to produce and sell, the fact that by now we would have had a fish processing plant, and contrary to popular belief, not in Island Harbor. And um, we would have been able to combat things like the high season we've had for the last about the ground seas that we had for the last about 6 weeks, where fishers are saying they are trying to at least get a day out in a week in some instances to combat ground sea. But if we had the facilities to support them with storage, they would still be able to support the hospitality outlets with the provision of foods and fish and other fresh items. And it's because of this approach to development as if it's an affront to what the front stands for. It makes you realize that elections does have consequences, and those consequences aren't macro. They aren't just, our abstract idea of the economy. It is lives and livelihoods. It is the people, the ordinary people doing extraordinary things who are being left behind and unconsidered. And what happens too is that when we see these crises, we look at what could have been. We look at, when we had COVID, if we had a strong food infrastructure, our food industry going on here, we wouldn't have to have some of the concerns that we've had. But you don't create those industries in crisis. You create them as a result of your acknowledgement of it. And when you are balanced, that's when you give your best and your most to ensure that all parties involved have an opportunity to thrive and to do their best and to create an industry. You can't go to farmers tomorrow and say, well, Florida isn't shipping anymore foods to Anguilla, so we're gonna need you to give us some potatoes. You need a farmer who has that assurance that we have created the necessary barriers for them and the environment for them and given them the necessary inputs so that they can continue to produce at high levels. So if ever there's a crisis, they can stand in the gap. And we need to stop looking at them as crisis actors and instead as active participants of our everyday economy. There's a lot of mindsets that I was trying to switch around, but also to give them the ability to improve the product that's really already good, but because we have international standards, just so that we can see that we've met those international standards. And we just see this, I know Mr. Banks used the term headless chickens against other people, but you wouldn't have imagined that it really aptly fits the people who took over his party today, because you have everybody doing things in 55 different directions, and you wonder if they are aware of the crises that are occurring here. Without the war, without the global energy crisis, without the food insecurity crisis, right here, right now, it doesn't even seem as if there's a grasp of the everyday vulnerable parts of our economy that needs that level of support. Because then you wouldn't see a government coming into power and immediately contract the economy by 50%. you wouldn't see those kind of things. You wouldn't see those kind of things, and then they come back and saying, well, we are a government of cutting once and measuring twice. And now that we've done the measurements, we're about to cut exactly the same way the APM was about to do 10 months ago. Congratulate us. Like, what is the I look, I cannot exist in Angola in peace. I go to funerals, baby showers. I go to the supermarket. I go, I I actually was on my way to the restroom one time and somebody was holding me up and said, listen, you can't go pee, you gotta stand up here and listen to me. And I said, well, what do you want me to do? Me and you in the same struggle. It's ridiculous because everybody who voted, who supported, who was quiet, who did not vote, they have the same cry. They have the same concerns. Oh gosh, education. I say, listen, your minister is somewhere doing everything else. I'm sorry to say it. But it everywhere, education, agriculture, Maiku, you know the old people say God bless the dead. Finance, social development, tourism, everywhere, every people who you didn't even feel would ever come to you with this kind of thing because they've always been so politically guarded. Everybody is saying what is happening here. What they're even predicting that there will be an early election. I don't know nothing about that. And I wished it because I want stability in my country.
Right.
But it is because of what they're seeing. It's because of what they're seeing and the lack of cohesive planning and idea. It really, really is a gaggle of, I guess, headless chickens. But the day old chick program is still happening. All of them have their heads, and I encourage persons who are interested to continue to support that initiative because it's important to food security.
Yeah, I'll jump in here because
Where do we go from there?
I'm so impressed with the contributions so far that I'm just thinking this is like when we were in cabinet, and the ladies took over and the ideas they came up with was so applicable to the people. I want to just go back a little bit, um, Quincy, and then Deanne followed up on that these are the ones that we should be looking out for. And the AUF has shown that they're good campaigners. In fact, they have talked about it's just electioneering for the most part, the promises they make. The people were hungry during the last the APM administration. The people were hungry. They couldn't afford anything, and fees had to go up and everything like that. And they've been in now for over 13 months. And the fees that they complained about that we had to allow to go up so that we could meet some of the conditions of the MOU for to get the $100 million from the UK for COVID relief. The ASPA fees, the health authority fees, which are now Department of Health fees, which had to go up. Uh, you know, the bulk fuel levy, which they complained about, which went up and we tried to bring down, and they still haven't brought in the legislation to bring it down to where it was before, and which would have helped so many persons because one of the conditions which Minister Gomesbury worked on with bringing down the bulk fuel levy was that the fisher folk would get reduced fuel prices. Think of how applicable that would be right now. Remember that after when COVID came, that the first group of persons that we worked so hard to get out to work where we could get them on the sea. So, and we had to delineate where they could go and how they could get out and get back and how they could dispose of their cat. We had to do that so that you could provide, good fish and lobsters and to feed the people of Anguilla, to then with the bubble concept to get the hotels and restaurants open, so you can get an economy going. Those folk have done the work, continue to show up after Hurricane Irma, even though they lost most of their fish traps and lobster traps. They went out and fished so that they could provide food while the country was trying to recover. You know, these are the folk that we were trying to help. These are the vulnerable. These are the businesses that we put money in the Anguilla Development Board and said, you can get up to 70,000 EC dollars to help to develop your business as fisher folk and farmers so that you can get started or you can continue the business you have. Where is that? Where is the government giving relief for those persons? We gave the electricity credits and the food vouchers, the property tax on domestic homes, but we also were moving towards property tax removal for businesses, Anguillan businesses, because we felt that it was time when we could do better. Before, when we had no revenue, when we were fighting a deficit of $97 million, we did what we could to help. We increased the contribution to the unemployed and underemployed from $800 to $1,000. Not much, but we did that because it shows that when we could do better, we did. We stopped government from cutting the public servants' salaries by 5% right after the election because that was already there on the books to come in. We stopped that from happening because we felt that to cut the public servants even more would scar the economy to a point where it would not recover. And then we gave them back monies. And we would have, while waiting to get this comprehensive salary review, to get the report, and so that we had put $25 million into the budget to help public servants. And we would have made sure that there was a stopgap raise while we were waiting to get this report to come in. Because we expected that it would come in October of 2024. And it didn't come in. Then we expected that to come in 25. By June of 25, we expected that public servants would have gotten a cost of living increase. And then those who had technical competence would even get a raise on top of that. That is still hasn't come in. We're now in April. And so, the feeling was we need to make sure that we shore up the economy, that there's more spending money in the economy. And so, but I find that right now that they talked about with the old goods and service tax that Anguillians were going to St. Martin to shop. There are more people going to St. Martin to shop right now than they were during the 5 years of the Anguilla Progressive Movement. Within the 13 months that have passed, there are more persons in that 1 year. And I know this because I'm told by the ferry boat owners that there are more people going over, and what comes back on the boat and what they see going over to Gallows Bay to come over on those boats is much more than happened during the APM administration. So it just shows you that this AUF relief plan, when it was proposed that it would fail back in September of 2024, when the technocrats from the Ministry of Finance presented at the House of Assembly gallery that it would fail, it has, and it has increased the cost to businesses, increased the cost to consumers, and it's decimated the economy in Anguilla such that everyone is saying now, there's been no relief. And now that the government has a chance and an excuse that it can give relief, because you can say to what's happening in the world, now it's time to open their hands and say, okay, we do have, the windfall from AI. It's bringing in $30 million a month, again, due to the vision and wisdom of the Anguilla Progressive Movement administration that moved it from where you couldn't account for how much money came in, because we knew that we were getting pennies on the dollars of revenue that came, because of it. And now that you can show how much is coming in and justify giving it over to Identity Digital to do the marketing thereof, here's an excuse for the administration to say, okay, let's help the people. And nobody can blame you for it. One, you have the financial independence now because we helped to get Anguilla to where the 3 guidelines that were tying our hands and had the foot on our neck, we were able to get those removed. And so now you have that financial freedom to do what you want with your own people's money. But also, you have enough coming in that you can make the excuse and say, let's help the people direct. We made some proposals of how that could be done. They've basically stood in the House and said, well, we are hypocritical because, we didn't do it when we were there. Several persons have said tonight, we didn't have the fiscal space to do it. And we were so constrained that out of the 100 million EC dollars that the UK gave us access to, we never got the 100 million because they basically restricted us to how much you could get, what you could use it for. And also, if we gave any concession to anyone in Anguilla, that had to be deducted from the monies that came in. And because, of course, you can't give a duty-free concession to a starting business or to any person or to somebody bringing in something that would help Anguillians without having then to account for that coming out of the 100 million that we were granted. So it just shows you that this government, even though they may have good sayings, it's all about you, putting people first, they never live up to the expectation that people vote for. And it's so obvious that they care more about how they look on the international scene, that they will be an Anguilla house, so they can stand up with BVI and say there's Anguilla house to compare with BVI house, to compare with the Falklands house, to compare with Gibraltar house. But you never hear that in England, that there is a Cayman Islands house, and they have finances is so much further advanced than Anguilla's, or a Turks and Caicos house, or a Montserrat house. So these are the concerns I have, is who are you trying to impress? You should be trying to impress the people in Anguilla that got you there, and the people in Anguilla who need that relief so that we can survive through these times that are now upon us, not even those ahead of us, but those are upon us. We are a people who are proud, who are resilient, and we may not always say how we're hurting, where we're hurting, but it's very obvious to see when your economy is going backward and people are not buying like they used to because they can't afford to. That's when government needs to jump in, because government is there for the people, by the people, of the people. Let's make it happen. And so we're not here just to criticize. We have given ideas. You had former ministers Quincy Gomes-Marie and Deanne Kintich-Rogers basically outlining plans that if this government was listening, we could have a turnaround in Anguilla tomorrow. Are they going to listen? Are they going to act? No. They'd rather to pause, to reassess, to reprioritize, and go backward. That is certainly not where we want to see this Anguilla that we worked so hard for, that our forefathers sacrificed for. We want to see Anguilla going in a positive direction and regain where it was, where we were leaders, and not only in our little space, but leaders in the Caribbean in general. I mean, during COVID, there were big islands reaching out to find out what Anguilla was doing in terms of the bubble concept of how you could separate tourists from locals and keep an economy going, how you could, keep an economy that was almost growing twice as fast as the countries around us. St. Martin was calling us and asking, we were, supposed to be economically ahead of you. How are you doing it so that, we can now adopt some of the packages that you guys are doing, some of the policies that you have implemented, so that St. Martin itself could keep on the right track. So when you go from that to now, we are basically laughed at in the Caribbean and elsewhere. This really is disheartening, frustrating, and certainly it makes me wonder, what are they hearing that we are not hearing? Because from what I'm hearing, from what the lady said they're hearing, from what we know is being said, it's really hard that they have turned a blind eye and a deaf ear to the cries of the people right now.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Webster, for making that point. I want to jump in on one thing you said that I want us to hone in on a little bit, which is the importance of reprioritization. the MTEP, the way how it's done is that there are escalation, de-escalation options. So worst case scenario, best case scenario. And I think what we have yet to hear from this government is how are they going to reprioritize in the face of what can be another fall off year? Because remember how well we were doing in 2019, and then we had a hurricane that just derailed everything. We're doing well right now, and the hurricane is not one that's going to pop up and affect us in a week and a half. The hurricane is building, fuel is being added to the fire. The hurricane is on Twitter, the hurricane is on Fox, the hurricane, like you can see it's not, it's not far from us. We can see that right now, the best thing to do for things that are not priorities is to wait a little bit and see how things pan out, because we can assume that we'll be redirecting a lot of our funds back to support measures for the country. And we aren't hearing anything about it. I would think that the London House conversation, if they are probably too prideful to say that they're no longer doing it, they could at least say that we are reassessing right now in light of what is happening. I think that is what you should be doing right now, because if you could have reassessed a government building, if you could reassess spending on the hospital, if you could reassess spending on agriculture, if you could reassess the extension of the runway, if you can reassess the track, you can't tell me that you cannot reassess the buying of real estate that is not critical or necessary or urgent. And if we aren't having those conversations, because around the way you're hearing that the next thing that's being reassessed is the civil servant salary increase. No, I am not a civil servant. But don't tell me, I don't care if the house is this much and the salary increase is this much. If you can't increase my salary, don't let me see you go buy a house. Okay? I don't care if the money coming from capital and this isn't recurring. If you ain't giving me my 20+% increase, don't let me see you buy that house, because I myself am going to sell a house to get back my money when the time comes. Because this is the kind of conversation you expect your government to be saying. It's like, listen, we had a budget and we read at the end of 2025 to 2026. These are the priority areas. Now that we're seeing some things happening, we're going to start peeling back. We're probably going to wait to Q4 to do XYZ. We're going to wait and see at this point to do such and such and such. These are fair arguments by a government that is measuring twice and cutting once. Let me see you cut that ribbon for the house up there before I give this to someone money. Let me see. Let me see. Let me see somebody else in the hospital sick because of mold in the place that they're at of work, because you are just refusing to do anything. I know in our time in government, a lot of things that we had to do was kind of like gun to your head. Like the UK is like, if you don't do such and such, you can do X, Y, and Z. You have the governor here, you have a situation where the lights are on at altar and allegedly nobody's home. You can do what you want. And this is what you do. And you are familiar with making sacrifices for the people because you are the party if you can't eat concrete. Now, what am I build houses in the UK? Because perhaps my issue here is that maybe eating concrete, and that's what I could do what I'm doing. Bricks. Because I mean, I think like I usually resort to humor when I see nonsense. Every time I see nonsense, I feel like I have to tell myself a joke, because there's a lot of hard work that went behind getting Anguilla to where it was in 2025. And now you're seeing everybody taking the easiest road to destroy the country. You know how much businesses can take a $250,000 investment right now from government?
I'm actually glad, and I want to jump in here because I'm glad you brought that up. because there is something that, APM and through Dr. Webster and the members of the opposition would have proposed, and that is the suspension of USL and what that would have done in terms of bringing monies, direct monies to the people's pockets and to the businesses. Because we have to remember that USL is paid for both by the employer and by the employee. In all of the discussion that's been happening from the current administration, they're speaking about the relief. But I question, are we actually getting relief? Is it just a stopgap? Because your electricity bills are not going to get any lower.
No.
By removing the duties, the recalculation of duties to remove the freight and insurance. And as we mentioned at the very top of the program, they've not removed it from the customs surcharge, the customs service charge. They've not removed it from the goods tax. So we're going to see an increase there. And we have to take into consideration that the cost of goods, the false cost of goods, have increased. So what they have provided as relief is not really relief. At the very minimum,
It's maintenance.
it is maintenance at the very minimum. And what we've not done, and I don't see it even as being maintenance, because again, the false cost of goods have already increased. I can speak, I know I had this conversation with a friend recently. The cost of beef has jumped from $20 a pound to $30 a pound.
But then it would just be maintained at $20. It's not going to go down. Not that they've done these measures. It's not going to go down to $16.
It's not even going to go down to the 20. It's going to stay at the 30. And I think that is the concern. And so where $100 would have gotten you before, you probably would get what you were getting, $80, $70, if so much. So where your money can stretch, and that is the concern that I have. So where you were getting electricity credits, that's money directly back into your pocket.
This is just keeping it
as what it was. Where you would get, if the current administration was really about putting people first and really about giving relief, then something like the suspension of the USL would ensure that persons had greater buying power, that businesses had that little buffer and could say, well, okay, where the price has gone up, since I no longer have to pay the USL, I can pass that on to the consumers. I really do question in terms of whether or not persons are truly appreciative of the fact that this relief is not relief.
The maintenance plan.
And the maintenance plan is falling apart. Deanna, I know you want to jump in here.
I actually just want to make a very short point, because I was reflecting on it. The plan to in relation to the USL that the APM would have suggested to the premier would really be the fulfillment of a statement of hers that she made in 2015, saying that it would be gone on day one. So
fulfill your own promises.
It is.
But she gotta run her department. She gotta run Michael. She gotta run education.
It's a lot for her. It's a lot for her.
You have some assistance from the other side of the aisle. Take it. It's free.
It's a lot for her. I can appreciate that. But that's what I'm saying. It is a very interesting thing, because it comes back to me to priorities. Whenever I pass through Stony Ground, people call me and they're like, "Dan, when the last time you see the Caracas by building?" And I'm like, please stop harassing my soul. Because every time I pass that building and I think about the fact that what we see reflected a lot nowadays is almost like a moral bankruptcy. Like there's nobody other than the opposition really calling out the nonsense that we see happening in the country. I mean, people are talking about it on the low, but maybe they're not on certain radio stations. But you have the Caracas by Berlin, you have the house in London, which people might think that this is not just a personal gripe. This is a gripe that the general population in Angola, people have been calling my phone talking about this house in London, and I am just like, you have to find a way to ensure that your concerns are reflected to your government, because this, it is symbolic, and it's symbolic because we talk about $6 million now, but over the course of 10 years, that could, I think the estimated cost is $52 million. And I mean, those numbers might not mean anything to you now, but when you think about what it would take to send all of the young people who reach the age of 17 to university, do you know how much that will come up to? Less than that $52 million. So when you ask me again about priority, about the opportunity cost, this is what I see. This is what I see. So I don't know. I don't know. I really do hope that they, I do hope that we are encouraging them to reconsider their current trajectory.
Put in pressure because they know they have to think.
Well, I would like to think that our leaders would like to think, but that's what I would like to think.
You would like to.
It's a wait and see situation as it relates to whether or not they're actually thinking. And do Quincy, I believe between Dr. Epstein and yourself, you spoke about what more can be done for some of the sectors that we deem to be most vulnerable. And Dr. Epstein did touch on it, the securing of a cheaper rate of gasoline for fishermen. One of the industries, and due to my seasickness, I tend to sit up front with the ferryboat operators quite often when going to St. Martin. But with the cost and the increase in fuel, and when we see what has taken place over in St. Kitts just today, where they announced the increase of the boat fare. What's the saying, when your neighbor's house is on fire, wet yours? The question is, what is coming next for us? And we speak so much about how persons do go to St. Martin for just their everyday groceries, because the cost is so much cheaper than it is to purchase here in Angola. What is going to happen if, God forbid, that boat fare has to be increased? And when we consider, and I know you mentioned this, when we consider the fact that government has chosen to subsidize some of these large hotels for their electricity credits, but you've left us dead in the water when it comes to our ferryboat operators. Ferryboat operators who, may I add, was some of the most affected for the longest amount of time during COVID. Where are the protections for those persons?
One of the things I wanted to touch on when Dr. Webster was speaking about the fuel cost is that reduced fuel cost was already negotiated. All it needed was follow through. There was nothing else required from the government. What I wanted was a bigger reduction. And one of the things that we considered was assisting them with the infrastructure development to bring the gas to the Island Harbor Wharf. And they said that they can then go down further than cents at that time. And as you know, there was a change in government. We weren't able to do that. But this is what I would call low-lying fruits, because the announcement was already made and the agreement was already signed. It was just to have a start date. There was no follow-through. One of the things we were working on as well was CRIF for the farmers. That's insurance for the farmers and the fishers. in the event of, and one of the new facilities by CRIF is that they have broadened their definition of catastrophe. So previously it was a lot like if there's a hurricane, but if there's a pest outbreak, if there's prolonged drought, they've broadened it so that if ever you just happen to lose your crop, or if there's some kind of environmental disaster that's chasing the fish away, then they would support with the livelihoods of those who depend on nature to make their livelihoods. And I have heard no continued conversation. I got the support of our then Premier and Minister of Finance, Dr. Webster, about CRIF and the government of Angola actually paying the premiums on behalf of the fishing and farming associations, and they just being the beneficiaries, so they wouldn't have to increase their overheads. And this is what we talk about when we talk about what do you call it? Food security. These are the things that we do. Now, there's something else that you mentioned just a while ago. I think I lost the question because I wanted to bring that in, which was what was the question? The ferry boats. So here's something interesting. When we were campaigning, right, there was a gentleman who was associated with one of the ferry boats, and he said, Quincy, I'm so happy that I had the chance to speak with you, and I wish that I had a chance to speak to you before, because I was not going to vote for you, because I was told that you wanted to penalize the ferry boat operators and for destroying the seas when we just to St. Martin and back. And I was like, that was so far removed from my mind. I was like, what do you mean? He's like, well, you wanted to do renewable ferries, and we were told that essentially that is you trying to trap us. It was this big conspiracy that he himself could not explain fully, but all he knew is that he should not trust it. And he told me the operatives of the AUF who gave him this story. But here we are today with our counterparts. We call them our counterparts because Kyle is dancing with them in Nigeria. So our Kittian counterparts are now dealing with the increase of costs and on their ferry operators, when we could have been at a place where we had renewable energy incorporated our sea travel, that we wouldn't have even been having to bother about this. And what I really dislike, and I want to use the word dislike about the AUF, is that they are indeed the enemy of progress. They tell our people at all times, progress should not happen unless you are individually benefiting. And when they see where you are individually benefiting, they try to sow seeds of doubt in the minds of the beneficiaries. And that has wasted decades worth of development in our country. Because what the APM did, it wasn't a magic trick. It wasn't a luck of the draw. It was just people with pure hearts working hard. That's it. Coming to work every day, doing the work of the people and prioritizing progress in our country. Sorry? No, listen, coming to work. Because those who ain't coming on time, at least are eventually showing up. Some of them don't show up at all. But that was the magic trick. That was the mystery behind the curtains. People committed to the development of our country. That's it. And you see now that if you are not committed, you undermine development. And that when you have the opportunity to sit at the helm and steer our country where it should go, you don't know development. You don't know what it takes to develop. You don't understand the pillars. You want the success without the work. You want the success without the understanding. All they're doing right now, blaming the civil servant, ain't giving them a raise, blaming them, writing them up, doing all kind of things, and still not understanding that at the end of the day, leadership comes from the top. If your department isn't operating, as a leader, you are supposed to you are supposed to inspire your department to operate. You are supposed to encourage them to get the work done. You are supposed to show them the vision of what can happen. And we don't see that in our current leaders. And we're seeing the consequence on our country. Because if a leader can tell somebody not to incorporate renewable energy in their boats, and then when they need support for fuel, they're giving that money to five-star hotels. Where is the disconnect? And where is the thought process?
Sorry, guys. I wanted to jump in on this device, but I think what Quinta is saying is also very interesting to me because it's the same antagonistic approach to progress that we saw in relation to the AUF sowing seeds of discord around the idea of Anguilla being fully renewable. I said it before, but I think it's worth saying because a lot of where we are today is a result of an actual intentional undermining of the country's ability to be fiscally secure, be energy secure, and to actually be progressive. And that is having a material impact on the lives of the people of Anguilla, on just our regular lives. And I don't think it's too much to ask our leaders to say, well, if we have the wherewithal to focus on the things that we find important, lower the cost of electricity, ensure that our homes have reliable water, because that is where we are now. We have the fiscal wherewithal. Well, we had the fiscal wherewithal, and I have to reemphasize that point because Quintia would have highlighted that when the AUF gutted the country's finances, when they got into office, they did reshape our ability to create that kind of security for our people. They did reshape it. Now, I can't say because the Premier also said he has not gotten a response in relation to the fiscal position of the country and the reserves. And that would tell you exactly what is being prioritized.
They would have shared it.
I think, and I agree with Quincy. If it was something to celebrate, it would have been something that was in the public domain. And unfortunately, I think that we're also seeing the return to the same type of secrecy that we've seen from the Anguilla United Front, term after term. And I think that that's a travesty for the people of Anguilla. Yeah.
You can say on this. Quincy wanted to jump right back in.
Well, no, I was telling you can stay because I was going to direct this next thought to you. And this is based on a conversation that we had recently. In terms of our people taking ownership of our development. And Quincy, you spoke about shifting the mindsets of even just the farmers about their role in our overall development, not just as players, during crisis. But and you spoke leaders having a responsibility to inspire and to want to move persons. If I go back through our history, a lot of our infrastructural development in the past was not done because of direct ownership or anything that we would have put in prior to the APM's administration. We would have had the transshipment monies that would have done asphalted our roads. You would have had the stamp duty from the sale of property at Flag that would have pushed us forward. We saw where, again, post-Armor, we had that infusion of funding from the UK to strengthen our infrastructure when it comes to our schools and stuff. But prior to the APM's administration, we've never had either the financial capacity or the the mentality of our people to want ownership to push ourselves forward. Your thoughts on that?
First things first, I'll say there's only one big bad doctor, the Honorable Ellis Webster. You lead from the top. And we had a leader who saw the value of an Anguilla reimagined. That's something that was repeated in our campaigns, our budget speeches, I mean, a regular press conference, Anguilla reimagined, because a lot of us, and I think myself included at one point, thought not small of Anguilla, but small of what we can achieve because of our size and all of the constraints. And I did not see it as a blank slate of possibilities. You need a leader to show you that and a vision to buy into, to be able to say, actually, Angola is dry, but we need to invest millions in food security. You know what I'm saying? Actually, the roads are bad, but we need to make sure that people have better experiences living in Angola, so we need to develop our roads. Actually, yes, we can have this island experience at Blowing Point under a tent, right? But we can have a state-of-the-art facility. Actually, we not only are going to move away from begging the UK for help with our airport, we are going to invest in ourselves, and at the end, we're going to own it. Anguilla's story is one of dignity. And that's what I learned being a member of the APM. And now I say learned, but it was a reoccurring mindset thing. We are a people who continually boast that we own. We own our land, we own our homes, we own our future, we own our destiny. Why wouldn't, as a government, as a country, as an institution, would we not want to also own our mistakes, own our past, and own our future? And that is what the Angola Progressive Movement was about. We owned the idea that we can build our airport, we can fix our roads, we can give, and that's part of the APM mission statement. We are judged by how we treat our most vulnerable in our society. And so we owned how we helped our young people. We owned how we helped our elderly. We owned how we help people who we know have a nature of not asking. Because if the credits weren't important, they would have been received the way they were received. We gave, I think, almost $3,000 in credits, and at every single turn, it was appreciated, but by 5 people, 6 people.
Those 6 people, did they return it?
They didn't return it. Now I want to call Anglic and say, do me a favor. we owned how we invested in ourselves and our future. We owned, and that AI is a big story of ownership of mistakes. We saw the mistake of how it was handled before. We did the work to ensure that our future was secured by getting someone who can handle it better. We owned that, and also we owned the attacks. We owned the work. You know, one of the craziest things I had experience in the 2025 to 2020 to 2025 period, people come into initiatives that we had done and say, it doesn't feel like I'm in Angola. I felt like it was my job single-handedly to change people's minds about what Angola can be and what it can do. They would say, oh, it don't even feel like we're here. We must become a country that feels like progress, that feels like you want to live in, like feels like a place that you want to be. And that's how you inspire people to continue. Do you know how many business owners? And this one, I don't know why I'm getting emotional. Where's the moon? There was a businessman who met me outside of a bank a day. And he looked at me and shake his head. And I smiled. I mean, you know what you do? I just smiled. I knew it was some of politics, but I didn't engage in the conversation. He said, no, you walk. I was leaving. He was entering. He came back to me, followed me to a vehicle and said, Quincy, you know what it is to pack up shop? And I say, not unwillingly, no. He said, because of the APM, I was prepared to invest. And something tell me, okay, the government changed, and we just see what's going on. And I had to pack up my dreams because the work was not being done to facilitate my dreams. He said, never before has a change in government affected the trajectory of my business like now. Because as leaders, you are supposed to bear the burden of doing the right thing for the people that you are entrusted to have. I hear a lot, a lot. I don't listen to the House of Assembly. I think it's nonsense. Papishness from the top to the bottom, from the front row to the back row. Nonsense, in, out, back, front. Especially what happened this week. The height of nonsense, because everybody in the house knows better. From the speaker to the mute, everybody knows better. But you see, people are watching. And that's my only, like, people are watching. People are saying things. People are asking the questions that you expect people to ask at a time like this. The thing for this government, because at the end of the day, I am deeply patriotic to my core, is that there's still time to turn it around. There's still time to rethink what you're doing. There's still time to think about the future. There's still time to look at the Ellis Webster philosophy of when times are hard, you still think about the future and think big. There's still time to hone that in. We can't do it today. Okay, you know what we can do? We can plan for tomorrow. Because the issue we're having is that we are not just losing votes, we are losing people in our country and the future of our country. And so it has to get to the point of getting serious. This is not just about the now. This is not just about how we're going to get past the impacts of the war. This is how Angola survives until the next caretakers take it over, because we're not going to be under this administration indefinitely. Somebody else is going to come around. It could be the APM, it could be the AMP, it could be somebody else. But we want to be able to hand the baton over with dignity. With dignity, and the people who come after us are supposed to inherit the story of ownership, the story of resilience. We're not supposed to put our country back to survival mode. What government intentionally does that? See, this is why I don't come on these shows all the time, because I get upset. I get upset because you're not looking at the now, you're looking at the future. What is Angola going to look like in 2050 with the trajectory we're at right now? Because I can tell you what it was going to look like in 2050 2 years ago. The outlooks were there. And it was very, very good. Everybody was saying it. And now we have a rolling back of the gains. We have to do better. We really, really, really have to do better.
You know, I just want to add one thing, because Quincy talked about ownership, and it reminded me of all of the moments that I've heard our leaders promulgate very limiting ideas on its people. And one of the moments that I'm reminded of is an interview with our premier where she was talking about the London House, and she asked, what's the hullabaloo all about? But more importantly, the actual comment that stuck with me was when she said, oh, it's just like the Lansombo Cultural Center. People only use it once a year. And it struck me to my core, because the Lansombo Cultural Center was built to be a year-round, always open facility. And we see where the ideas and the limiting beliefs of our leaders leave facilities where other people made the investments in, not on the backs of the people of Angola. The London House is going to be on the backs of the people of Angola. But it is that limiting belief in and of itself that shows you how they actually look at and consider the assets of our country. And I'm also 2 years on now, I'll say 2 years on now, I look back at all of the processes that were democratized by the APM. And I think Quincy was referring to this man who was talking about um, his business picking up shop and leaving his business. But I think that what motivated a lot of people to invest in Anguilla was the fact that the APM's policy was a policy of democratizing, making sure that everybody had an opportunity. That's really that's what we were going for. But you can see the difference. Again, there's a pivot where under the AUF, they pick and choose who gets an opportunity. And I think it bears saying that when you can hear sitting members of Anguilla's parliament who draw a public salary from the taxpayers of the people of Anguilla, going on radio and thanking a minister who's responsible for economic development for the people of Anguilla, thanking them for ensuring that he personally, privately got the benefit of working at a private establishment, an economic, as one of our potential economic drivers. It tells you again about the attitude of our leaders. That's an attitude and that's a perspective shift, because it's not about democratizing for everyone to get an opportunity. It's about it's not, well, it would be the opposite. It's about getting opportunities for themselves. Because, and that is why I say it is important for us to question our leaders, because in the same way that you are able to thank someone for an opportunity, there are persons who are working in the private sector who have no public sector salary to fall back on, who are paying you all of the taxes, who are paying government fees. Yet, persons who are drawing a public salary are competing directly with them. It's a very strange turn of events, but stranger things have happened.
Well,
You know, Quincy, when you spoke about that business person who referenced, with a the change of administration and wanting to feeling the packing up of his dreams. Post-election, I would have been approached by a young person, not yet eligible to vote at the time. And they said to me, I cried. I cried when APM lost the election, not because you lost, but I cried for the future that I have lost. And that to me was very profound, extremely profound. As a 16, 17-year-old young person, for them to recognize that where the country was going under the APM administration, they could see a future here. And now it feels as if though that dream, those hopes for their future have been shattered. So, Dr. Webster, I will turn over to you or any further comments that you may have.
Thank you very much. We are living in a stark reality that where we where we were and where we are so diametrically opposed, and it's I get frustrated. Not to get emotional, but I was very emotional when Quincy was talking, and to see what our vision was for Anguilla, and still is, but that it has now been stymied, and certainly this seems to be what happens in Anguilla, that when progress is being made, that things come to a standstill or go backward, and then you have to dig yourself out of that hole. So you're just basically trying to get back to where you started. And I just worry that by 2030, the hole is going to be so much deeper than it was in 2020 or in 2010, that what we will have to expend, not only in terms financial, um, but in terms of the opportunity cost that could have moved us ahead, that it will still be trying to get back to where we were by 2035. And I think I did predict this, though. I did say during the campaign that if the people of Anguilla elect the Anguilla United Front, that we would, get to a point that it would be difficult to recover from, that they would drive the country backward economically, etc. And, you know, I hate to be right in that regard, because, it just says that, we have choices, and we have to make informed choices. And I think that anybody in the 2025 um, campaign could see that, given the choice between a nice slogan and um, a dance coming up of, where they were singing and dancing united together, that that we had done the work. I mean, and it showed. That it wasn't a matter of that you were anticipating what could be done, what was possible. You saw it happen throughout the time. We saw it happen during bad times, because, as I said, in 2020, the financial status of Angola was underwater and very bleak. But even you saw it as times got better and the finances improved, that there were big leaps. I mean, in terms of food security, we were spending, $2 million in food security, unprecedented in Anguilla. Shade houses, and the 1 day chicks. I mean, these are not things that are new now. These are things that Honorable Quincy Agamzuri did way back when, over 3 years ago. These were, now I don't want to use the word hatched because that's a pun, but these ideas were hatched way back then, and then they were stopped. The abattoir, these are all ideas that were necessary, that are essential to Anguilla's progress, because as we go forward, and we are expected to live up to better standards. I mean, so we could, do export of our fish and lobsters and any other type of agricultural exports. Even if we do where we can take excess crops and do processing of jams or whatever else we do, to be able to export those products, we have to meet a certain standard. And that's where things were headed, because once you got that, then you'd have a lab that was equipped so that you could meet standards that you could export. And that's how we would get more direct capital coming into Anguilla by these different industries that we would develop. And our young people were on board. They were at us all the time. What's the next step? How are you looking out for us? The the AYBF, the business incubator program that Deanne came up with, mentoring, uh, young people so that they could come up with their own creative businesses, find niche areas that had never been explored before, coming up with apps that can enhance the lives of all Anguillians, not just people, and coming up with ideas. These were all there, and they were not only at the budding stage, these were being developed and being financed, some by government and some by private investors who saw the vision and were throwing themselves into it to make sure that it happened. And now most of those private investors have backed off because they don't get the same support from government that they got during the APM administration. They don't see the government taking the steps, putting the things in place so that these could be facilitated. And so we've lost so much, and there's so much more we'll lose because it seems like there is a blockheadedness, to use a word that they used to use when I was in junior A, that you were blockheaded because you didn't listen and didn't follow what you were being taught. I think that this administration has shown that they're not willing to listen, to learn, and to enact ideas that can help to move Anguilla forward. And that's the travesty of this time in Anguilla. And as the shocks come, external and internal shocks come, because there's a shock also of our young men who are still, committing crimes of gun crime and violence, and we still haven't taken the steps to do what is necessary for that, to provide opportunity for them. Now I know that Monique Webster and her programs, along with the community services planner, they're doing things to find ways to engage our young men, especially, but all our young people with those programs, teaching them plumbing, teaching them mechanics, electrical, teaching them, teaching the young women cosmetology and things like that. These are important things that are necessary. They may be just ripples in the water, but just think you drop that stone and then those ripples become those concentric circles that go out and touch people so that they then develop businesses that enhance our communities. And if you can have productive members of each community, just think about what a beautiful island we'd have. But we got to get the other things too to help the police with the law enforcement, the CCTV, which now for 3 years has not been implemented as yet. I mean, these are the low-hanging fruit that Quincy mentioned earlier that we could have done and should have done. And so it's hard to sit back and watch this everything just basically spiral downward. It makes you feel like what you did is worth nothing. And that to me is very frustrating. And I'm a frustrated person, because I think that the plans that we had, if they had even a quarter of what we had planned had continued, Anguilla would be in a much better place right now than it is. Our communities are better. You wouldn't have government ministers stopping projects, community projects like the basketball court building in Island Harbor, which would have served so many good purposes now. You could have tournaments. You could have the young men and women using that court, not having to worry about the elements, the sun and the wind. The one in Blowing Point that has been stopped, and I heard knocked down, demolished. I mean, how can you take somebody's investment of 300,000 US dollars and then just knock it down without any feeling that that person who had come to Anguilla and seen the need and contributed, they would never donate to Anguilla again. But just think about the persons who are watching what happened, who are potential donors, who are now saying, well, if that's what the government is doing with these type of investments, why should we invest? We have steel up there in Island Harbor on the pond that is rusting out now because the Minister for Infrastructure decided on the 7th of April just 2 days ago, a year, went and stopped the project from happening. And when I wrote him on the 9th of April, I still have not received a response. And that's 1 year, 365 days ago that I wrote to him, and he has not had the decency. I can't even say respect, because you don't have to respect me, but respect the people of Island Harbor that voted for him as an island-wide candidate. These are the things that bother me, that $150,000 US committed to that project is basically now rusting on the pond. And that is a society in decline when you see it happening like that. It's just a metaphor for what the AUF has done to the country of Anguilla, that we sacrificed to get it to where it was, that the people sacrificed to get it to where it was. That bothers me. And before, what kept me up at night was that, to make sure that we did the right thing for the people of Anguilla. Now what keeps me up at night is to see the social decline, the economic decline, the financial distress, and the cries of the people of Anguilla as they go through these crises, some global and some that are self-made by our administration. At the AUF, I'm really, really concerned for Anguilla, and it hurts my heart to see where things are. And I don't have any confidence that it's going to get any better. If I had confidence in any member of the current administration that things would get better, yeah, they're blowhards. They get up and they talk a lot, and they fire back at you if you say something. If you criticize what they're doing, the initial thing is to fire back at you and say something that they think is going to hurt you. Like that immigration should give me time when I come to Anguilla. What I want them to know is that I am more Anguillan than all of them. All of them. I was born in Anguilla. Some of them were not. And so, I am the only person in the House of Assembly now and ever who gave up, U.S. citizenship so that I could be compliant with the Constitution of Anguilla that stated you can't have allegiance to a foreign power and while you're running for government and sitting in there. There are a lot of persons in there who, before the law change in 2019, was sitting in there illegally, who never had to show the renunciation papers and had to have the race seal that could be felt by the supervisor of elections before you could be nominated. I'm the only person who had to do that. So when they talk what they want to talk, tell them come. As somebody they used to say I was an Anguillan enough. I want them to know that I'm more than enough. And so I will continue to speak on behalf of the people of Anguilla, to represent the people of District 1 and the people of Anguilla. And when they're ready to do otherwise, tell them to come. Like Harold say, you come.
Dr. Webster, I think they knew that they weren't ready. During the 2020 campaign, their slogan was,
But
that's 2025. But during the 2020 campaign, their slogan was ready on day one. But what we're seeing now is that even at day 400 plus, they're still not ready.
That's for sure.
They're not ready. They've shown that they're not ready. They're not ready to lead. They're not ready to move Anguilla forward. They're not ready to do what is in the best interest of the people of Anguilla. What they are ready for is to do what's in the best interest of themselves. We speak about the house in London. And just to wrap up, it is mind-boggling that they are willing to spend money on a house in London before they give financial reprieve to the people of Anguilla. They're willing to spend $16 million on a house in London. And I know when Deanne was speaking, she was speaking about the overall cost. I believe it was either yesterday or today where I heard council tax was going to be going up in the UK. So whatever it is we predicted for over the next couple of years, add to that because it's going to continue to increase. And so my question is, if you're not ready on day one, you clearly said you were not ready on day one because you had to pause and reassess. So you are not ready on day one. We are now at day 400 plus. You're still not ready. When are you going to be ready? When again will you be ready? I don't see it. I really don't. Well, I mean, maybe we'll get ready if we were to stay in Anguilla. Maybe we'll get ready if we were to actually put people first and not be dancing on a stage in Nigeria. At some point, you have to be willing to stay and do the work. And we've not seen that. And that is why on day 400 plus, they're still not ready. They're not ready to lead us. Quincia?
Yeah, it has been a pleasure being here. What we're discussing is not a pleasure because it's affecting all of us. But I think that, like I said, I think that we're hopeful. We're hopeful on what Angola will be resilient and Angola will remain. We have learned that. If nothing else, the AU have taught us, even in their best efforts to destroy the country will remain and it will thrive again. So I think that if they don't course correct, the resilience of our people, the love of our country, we will remain. We will be here. Angola Day 100 will be celebrated. You know, like it's going to happen. I just think that in 2026, we don't need to be having concerns for our future because of our hopscotching ministers. You know, ministers and everybody else, ministry not theirs. They're all over the place. They're not here. The policies aren't coherent. They aren't listening to the technical staff. Governor not governing. I mean, there's a lot of things that's happening in the country. And like Dr. Webster said, we are dealing with what's happening internally that will only be ballooned by what's happening externally. And so we need to, as I guess as individuals and as a community, to look out for each other. And we know how to do that. You know, we know how to make $1 out of 50 cents. That has been the Angolan story. And I just encourage everybody to hold on. A lot of people, a lady messaged me about an encounter she had at a government office and said, everything feels hopeless. Everything feels hopeless. And I feel ridiculous for expecting good things for my country at this point. And I sent a message and I didn't even respond to it. I had to call because it was such a heavy message. At some point I was telling myself, like, let the government govern, don't go on radio, just, do your do. But I feel like what I have, and many people have been asking, like, where are you? Because, not because you're no longer in government, we still want to hear your voice and such. And I think in reflecting over the last year, I realized that search is because people are desperate for leadership, and they wouldn't have had that feeling if they were getting leadership from who was elected. I had someone who did not vote for me, cry in front of my face at the grocery store. It's heavy. It's heavy because people are expecting you to turn the straw into gold, and you're on the outside and there's nothing you can do. But there's a government with the ability, with the finance, they're getting the ideas, even though they're not generating them. They're getting the suggestions. They just need to do. They just need to do what's right for our people. I opened by saying we cannot apply ordinary measures to extraordinary times. That is the reality. You can't go with a mop bucket when your system wall break away. You yourself would drown. You know, calling the people who know better, calling the people who studied for for moments such as these, do what's right by the country. And I think that's all we are asking. I mean, Dr. Webster has been doing an honorable thing. He is messaging he's communicating directly with the premier. I just gotta speak their language. He is speaking directly with them. He is trying his best. And I think at this point, just accept the help and let's move on. People have short memories. They can remember we help you in 2026, done all the way to 2030. They can remember. They just remember something got done. Let's just get it done and let's do what's right for the people and let's move on. It doesn't make any sense for us to suffer the price of the egos. And, you know, I know this show was supposed to be done at 9:30. I think the topic is just so heavy that we're here. But I'm wrapping up. I will say my good evenings. And it's always a pleasure to be in the company of great individuals like yourselves. And I'm just looking to see how many ways how far our push from the outside ripples up, down the streams.
Good evening, everyone. And my name is not Quincy Gomsuri. I just, but it was a pleasure again to be here and to speak and bring light to the issues that people are coming to us about and discussing with us and asking us to bring light to for this country. And as many of the persons in this room with me will know, that a lot of people have been coming to us and they've been laying their burdens at our feet. And I mean, I met a lady on sports day. I was leaving sports day, and she stopped me and she's like, "Diane, yeah, I can see you again." And it was obviously a layered question. It wasn't about whether she was going to see me tomorrow, but whether or not she can see me in a few years. And it just was a reminder that, even people who would have said initially, or you felt didn't care about the issues happening in the country, or they weren't very vocal, there are a lot of people who, upon seeing what has happened, now have the language to say, I do know what I would like to see. And that's something that I think all of us deal with. And what I would like to say to the government tonight, as we continue DMs with the APM, is that there is still an opportunity for you guys to turn it around. Our leader of opposition has been writing incessantly to you to ensure that you keep the people informed, that you fulfill your duty to be transparent about the public's finances, not your personal finances, and that you do the work that is necessary to ensure that this country is never put back again, where we have to look to our mother country for a handout. And if it opens their hearts, because I'm sure some of their people are listening, I would implore you to take on some of the suggestions that have been made, not just in this forum, but in multiple forums that we've had, to possibly think about setting aside your egos and doing the work. Just do the work. I spoke to a young lady 2 weeks ago, and she came to me and she asked me, she's only in fourth form, and she came to me, she asked me, remember when you said you were working on scholarships for all of us? I am now looking at universities, because this is a time when they start sorting through. And she said, do you think that that's going to be a reality for us? And again, the feeling of being very helpless in that situation was very weighty. And it's something that I think the government really has the opportunity to do to continue the work to ensure that things and opportunities of this nature materialize for our young people. It is their number one obligation. And so I pray that tonight and all of the sessions that have taken place with online DMs, online, what?
APM Online, girl.
APM Online really do convince the government to take on our ideas and move forward for the country.
Just before you wrap it up, I know today we lost stalwart journalist Sir Carlton Pickering, from Creative Communication Network, and I certainly want to wish condolences to his family. I think that even though he wasn't born in Anguilla, he really had that spirit of keeping the people informed and, you know, keeping the history so that we would not repeat the mistakes of the past. So I just want to say condolences to the family of the late Carlton Pickering, whom I call Sir Carlton. And, we'll miss him and miss his constant questions to ensure that we kept the people informed of when we went to meetings, what we brought back, and what we learned. I hope that someone will continue to keep, leaders and government officials and public servants to task so that the people's money is spent wisely. And I'll say good night and let you finish up. And this was an excellent show. Thanks to all the participants and certainly to you, Gleneva, for moderating and also giving us your insights. I know that this show will continue to keep the people informed appropriately. And we do get questions asked that we can respond to in this forum as we go along. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Webster. And yes, I would like to echo my condolences to the family of Mr. Carlton Pickering Sr. I know his presence will be missed. He certainly was a force of holding persons accountable, and especially during these times, during this administration in particular, who have shown that they're not willing to be open and transparent with the people. His voice will certainly be missed during press conferences and the like. Again, thank you to everyone who has tuned in. You that we're playing a little bit of musical chairs. It shows Quincy Gomes Marie, but it is still me. And so I want to wish everyone a good night. And we will be back here again next week. When I say we, some of the team will be back here again next week, Thursday, for APM Online, Conversations with the Source. And on Monday, I know we missed this Monday because it was Easter Monday, and I hope everyone had a really good Easter and spent a good time up at Festival Del Mar. But Monday, In the Know, we'll be back with our parliamentary opposition, and I'm certain there's going to be a lot that they are going to be discussing during that time. So thank you again, everyone, for being here and spending this Thursday night with us. And we look forward to seeing you again soon.